Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 986. Unfortunate Limitations. Carl's team gathered, and Naksha transformed back into a human, so she could hear all the gossip. Well, she asked. Northwest of here is another regiment. They're hunting leftover monster packs. That is where we will head, and we can attack any groups we find between here and there. Carl explained. The black dragon nodded happily. That is perfect. Much better than hunting fluffy things. The fur got stuck in her teeth. The unit was packing up to get ready to go, and Lotus had set up her healing station to ensure that there were no more lingering effects of the undead curses. So, Thor took his time getting the carriage out and getting set up to travel. The regiment began moving as soon as their gear and supply carts were loaded. So Carl hopped in the driver's seat and let Hawk lead them northwest towards the next group of monsters that he had found, while the regiment headed east. These ones are alive and there is no spawn point. Just a whole group of thingies. Hawk explained. The bird was completely lost on this continent. He really needed to read a book to find out what the names of all these creatures were, but he never seemed to get around to it. Plus, they all looked like a blend of multiple animals and it was just weird. Describe them as well as you can. Carl suggested. Horses with horns and wings and flaming hooves. Hawk tried. Not even Remy knew what that was. There was a similar demonic monster known as the Nightmare, but it didn't have wings. Maybe they'll be friendly? They've got fire magic. Hawk suggested. What are they doing now? Just standing around an oasis between sand dunes. That sounded like an ambush, waiting for someone to come to the oasis for water. Thor led them to the oasis, and Carl knocked on the carriage to warn the ladies that there were monsters. Lotus hopped down and saw the creatures, then cheered and began to run down the hill. Carl cast a barrier over her, just to be safe, but the beasts showed no sign of attacking as she approached. However, they backed away as she approached, unwilling to let her pet them, even if they weren't feeling hostile. Her, if not friend, why friend-shaped skill was defective, Lotus decided. It only negated the hostility, and she still couldn't pet the fire ponies. Lotus, leave them alone. They clearly don't want to cuddle. Carl joked. Lotus sighed and headed back up the hill, and one of the beasts came up to bump her with its nose, then nuzzle her face before running back to the herd. I take it we're not attacking the monsters? Philia asked. They're not hostile to the rest of us, so I would say that they can stay. We will look for ones from the monster spawns to eliminate. Carl agreed. Hawk didn't mind that. They were flying fire horses. It was hard to dislike them. Thor led the way northwest as Hawk spotted a group of monsters that were clearly behaving irrationally, attacking the ground wildly. The beasts sensed them even before Thor brought the carriage to a stop, and he had to put up a bulwark to keep them from charging before he could store the precious wagon. These looked like someone had managed to make a rhino bipedal with 3-fingered hands, but the same thick hide and head shape. They didn't use any weapons or equipment, and the moment that Carl leapt over the wall of ice, they attacked as a group, crashing into each other to get to him first. The epic guard appeared behind the group, and Carl realized that he never removed the Haint Claw from the Summon Protector. They were much better at working together now, and the odd teleportation ability that the Haint Claw granted was being used in conjunction with the advanced combat skills of the Epic Guard, instead of emulating Kara and just jumping the monsters to beat them to death. That was a huge improvement in the combat power of the Epic Guard, and the rhino monsters were briefly confused as they were attacked from somewhere that they had just passed. Carl hacked into them with the Blade of Champions, and the Overlord ranked hide split smoothly, while the resistance made Carl strain to keep up his blade speed. A kick sent a beast flying backward to keep his left side clear, and then Ophelia and Thor were at his sides. With Carl and Ray both emitting oppression effects with their aura, the two massive combatants were tearing apart the rhinos, which left Hawk with nothing to do but scout for more of the creatures. There were thousands of these upright rhino monsters over the surrounding 100 kilometers, and the sand was ending, replaced by dry yellow grass. That should mean that they were close to the other army people, too. Army people meant big battles. Big battles meant lots of practice with his fire. Better fire meant chances to advance. Hawk was still determined that he was going to manage to trigger a skill master activation and get himself totem-ranked fire in advance. Carl cut down the last of the beasts in the group they had encountered, and Ray cleaned the battlefield. Just in case the blood was good for something. It smelled sweet and earthy, it might be good for the vampire. But that reminded Ray. She had promised to check up on her baby rogue. She had been slacking on her responsibilities. Carl, can you make a tiny portal back to the academy? She asked. Carl considered that for a moment. It shouldn't be a problem if the portal was small. He had an absolutely enormous amount of mana, and items for mana cost reduction. How long will you be? He asked. Give me like 15 minutes. If my math is right, it should be just after midnight there now. Ray decided. Everyone, we're taking a break. Ray needs to go do a thing, and I will hold a portal open for her while she does it. Carl informed the group. Carl focused on the academy using the most familiar view that he could think of. The one from the gazebo overlooking the courtyard and the front gates. The portal was only the size of a baseball, but Carl could see that it was on the patio of his old room. Exactly where he wanted it. All right, go do what you need to, and then come back. Chapter 987. Baby Rogue. Ray stepped through onto the balcony of her old room and found that her hammock was still hanging there. Recently used, but empty. The plants were all in great shape, showing that someone was taking proper care of them, and there were school books on the table in the gazebo. It all smelled like her baby rogue, so Ray activated Night Haunter and stepped through the wall of the room to see who was in the bed. Sure enough, the little one was sleeping soundly, splayed out across the bed on a diagonal, and laying on top of her blankets. Ray switched to humanoid form and deactivated Night Haunter, then carefully laid out the armor she had made for Sybil on the bed. That clueless little rogue was still sleeping, and Ray sighed. She really had been slacking. There was no sense of danger at all. In a moment of brilliance, Ray decided that she would teach her baby rogue a lesson in practical jokes. Piece by piece, she fit the armor on the sleeping rogue, careful not to wake her up. When only the boots were left to go on, Ray stopped and took out some silk string. A quick slip knot tied the rogue to the bed, and Hawk helpfully donated a feather to her cause. The moment that the feather touched her foot, Sybil was awake and going for her daggers. But she was already tied, and unable to escape the tickling. "Gah, no. Please not the feet," she pleaded, as Ray laughed quietly. "Didn't I tell you that I would be checking up on you? Look at this. So deeply asleep that you didn't even notice that I got you dressed." Ray scolded Sybil, trying not to let her get used to the sensation. Shadow Step briefly got Sybil free of her restraints, but Ray caught her in midair and fit the boots to her feet. "All right, now here are a pair of daggers. Keep them safe. Your progress looks pretty good. Not quite as fast as I had hoped, but not terrible. So we're going to do an exercise and then we're going to play a game," Ray instructed. Sybil didn't quite understand what she meant until Ray put a hand on both of Sybil's shoulders and flooded her with mana at commander rank quality. The rogue squealed in pain as the mana in her body was forced out, and she tried to attack, but nothing a low ascended rank rogue could do would injure Ray in the slightest. The process went on for what felt like an eternity, but was actually only about 5 minutes. Then Ray nodded in satisfaction. "There, now your body knows what it feels like to be a commander. Even if it doesn't stick with that when you burn this batch off, you shouldn't have any bottleneck to advancement. Now for the fun part. Run away. I will give you a treat for every minute you can keep me from catching you." Sybil leapt through the bathroom door and Shadow stepped into the gymnasium, while Ray activated Night Haunter and followed along. She created a golem to let Sybil know that she was there, and the rogue vanished again with the spider in hot pursuit. The golem was dismissed as they played their game, but the skill had alerted a number of the teachers whose rooms were near the indoor training areas, and they were now on high alert against invaders. Sybil ran, teleported, even used a glider that she had acquired for just this sort of situation to try to outrun her mentor, but every time that she thought she had escaped, Ray would let a bit of her aura slip and send her fleeing again. Mindful of the time that Carl was keeping a portal open for her, Ray only chased Sybil for about 5 minutes before catching her halfway through a shadow step and bringing them back to the rogue's bedroom. "Not bad, you have been training your skills. Just not your situational awareness. Ask the teachers to show you the trick to being alerted the moment that something moves near you in your sleep," Ray ordered. "So, you're not mad at me for being slow? When will you come back full-time?" Sybil asked hopefully, and Ray patted her head. "I will be a totem soon, and there is no good food there for me here anymore. Well, not enough of it. So, I will stay here, but I will be sure to check up on you more often now that I have an easy way to get back to you. I expect you to make use of today's bonus and make it to commander rank by the end of the semester," Ray instructed with a stern tone. Sybil giggled. The new semester had just started. She would be able to make commander right away, and then when her mentor came back, she would be ready for anything. Ray nodded in satisfaction, and then used Shadow Step to move through the portal and back into the carriage. "I appreciate your patience. We can head out now." Carl closed the portal, and Thor started heading to Hawk's next waypoint, while Sybil stared at her new gear in wonder. She hadn't had time to inspect it before, but this was all master-crafted leather, made by Ray, an epic grade at the Overlord rank. But so were the daggers. They were beautiful, dull black with a poison effect on them, though entirely made by Ashbringer, and not as powerful as the set that Carl had upgraded and Ray had kept after they taunted the item collection person in Drod with them. Fully Overlord ranked gear, and she was about to make commander rank. Sybil was still in shock at how suddenly things had changed after Ray showed up again. But if she could do all that in one day, couldn't she have done that for her weeks or months ago? Maybe she would have broken all the records for progression, and not just the ones to ascended rank. But Ray would be a totem soon, so Sybil was convinced that she might be able to make her a royal if she was a strong enough commander the next time the spider arrived. She was going to have to work harder. Chapter 988. Wine or Potions. Ray was in a glorious mood now that she had fulfilled her promise to Sybil. There were also many upcoming battles with the strange rhino things, and they were fun to pick on. But the real moment of glory came from Remy. You know, making wine is a bit like making potions. I bet that I could brew you some blood wine out of that if you think it smells good. Just put it in one of these large jars and I will get it started. Remy offered. How long will it take? Ray asked hopefully. According to the book, it takes a month for wine to be ready. I don't know if blood wine is the same, but it should be something like that. Then it can be aged to mellow the flavor. If you have enough, I have an empty ale keg in here, and we can age it in the charred wood like a fine liquor. Ray thought about that. A smoky, woody flavor might be nice. Let's do it. I've got enough bodies for a barrel already. With so much to do, researching blood wine, crafting the first batch, and trying to balance the flavors while guessing what both Ray and Mick would like, Remy sat out the next battle and just sent her bodyguards to help out on her behalf. There were only like 50 of the monsters anyhow. 5-on-1 was easy work for the team. The monsters had been out of the spawn area for quite a while, and they had mostly split up into smaller groups. So, while there were hundreds or thousands of them in the area, they only had to fight a few dozen at a time. The real question was, where did they come in from? Normally, a number of monsters would stay near the anomaly, and there was a chance that the anomaly would produce more of them over time if it didn't destabilize. Tessa hopped up onto the bench beside Carl. Why don't we switch? I will watch Thor and you can rest. Carl smiled. All right, I need to meditate and work on my power level. Enjoy your ride. Just remind Thor that he has to alert the rest of us if there is trouble. Then he went to the tiny world, where everyone else was relaxing, and settled into one of Ray's hammock swings to work on his power growth. Dana came over to join him, and the two spent the rest of the day side by side, focused on growing their power. Carl wasn't sure if he should move beyond the stage of the mental formations that he was on right now. The dragon visualization had worked so well that he didn't want to mess it up when he was so close to the totem-ranked advancement. His power was right on the border between ranks now, and if he had a totem-ranked repository of power, he could purge his power again and step right through. But he didn't have one, so he was working on condensing the power in his body, hoping to force a quality advancement. After the prolonged battle with Tiffany, the totem-ranked vampire, Carl knew just what the power should feel like. He just couldn't quite get it right in practice. However, leaning against Carl as he worked was an incredible benefit to Dana. Not just because she could use his power as a guideline to help advance her own, but because the process of trying to advance his power caused a small amount of power to leak, so there was more ambient mana in the area when he was meditating. As the afternoon faded to night, Dana realized that there was something distinctly different about Carl's current physical status. Not only was his mana pool enormous, but his presence gave a feeling of otherness. When you stood near a powerful being that was hiding its nature, there was usually some indication, and Carl gave that same sense, but she knew that he was still an overlord. So, it had to be something related to that silver bracket that appeared around his name after the last trial. Nobody seemed to know for sure what it meant, or it wasn't visible to everyone that they met. But Dana's suspicion was that Carl really had managed to evolve himself into the living equivalent of a dungeon boss. They had red icons at their names in the system, but if they weren't hostile, wouldn't it be possible that their name markers were the same as his? She had completely lost track of time until Remy came to shake the two of them out of their trance. It's time to get up. Thor found the 7th Nerazir Regiment, and they've missions. She instructed. Missions? That sounds interesting. Dana agreed as she stretched, then flopped back against Carl. He chuckled and put an arm behind her thighs to pick her up and carry her on his hip. All right, let's go see what the dwarves have in mind for missions. The general laughed as he saw the furry white demon come out of the carriage with a much smaller, apparently human, mage on his hip. Carl set Dana down once they were out of the wagon and went over to greet the totem-ranked dwarf. My people tell me that you have some missions available to help with the clearance of the excess monsters and related issues. Carl greeted him, skipping the formalities. Indeed. What sort do you prefer? Combat? Rebuilding? Supply runs? Or did you have something else in mind? The general agreed. I think combat is about right for our group. We do enjoy a good fight now and then. Plus, the Black Dragon asked her cleric to come here and help with the overpopulation issues. Carl explained. In that case, I have exactly the sort of missions that you would enjoy. Come with me to the command tent and I will explain the situation. The general turned to leave, and the officers nearby motioned for everyone to join him, not just Carl. That was unusual. Normally, they would want to keep people out of the command area, so only one would be allowed to accompany the general. Chapter 989. 7th Nerazir. The command tent, as the general had called it, was more of an art gallery of mission posters. Carl realized. Every surface was covered with reports, each of which had a bounty amount listed on the bottom, or a military strategic points value. Carl wasn't sure what that meant, but assumed that the reward would come directly from the military for those missions that were closest to the populated areas. You can choose what you like from anything on the walls that's all nearby within 200 kilometers. The map contains more incidents and suspected spawn points, if you want to go further afield and sate the god's bloodlust that way. The general explained. Naksha stared at the sheets on the walls. This is all within 200 kilometers? Most of these are military company-sized elements, headed by overlords or totems. I am well aware of the situation. Thank you. This is what we're working with. There's 50 of them to every man in my regiment, and even the cavalry can't move fast enough to deal with them all. Every time that you remove one group, another comes to claim its territory. The general grumbled. Naksha turned to Carl, but he gestured for her to pick. This was her god's mission, so she should be the one who knew best what was important. The Black Dragon's eyes seemed to absorb the light in the tent, as she reached out and grabbed 4 papers off the walls. These 4 should be all close together. We can start with these and then come back to pick more. Naksha decided. Carl looked at the sheet and saw that they were all related, but they had been spotted at different locations yesterday. All 4 of them detailed groups of small monsters, mostly royal ranked, but with overlord ranked leaders. That seemed like an odd choice for the Black Dragon, but maybe that was a balance thing? There should be nearly 1,000 of the creatures in the groups, as opposed to 5 or 10 per group for most of the overlord ranked threats. By pure numbers of excess, these were the largest that Carl could see among the sheets. Starting off ambitious, are you? I will warn you, the rock goblin spawn was a nasty one. They're not normal goblins, they can use earth magic. The general informed her. Naksha nodded. The Black Dragon insists these need to go. She turned to leave, and Dana took one last look before following. Now she understood why they had all been invited into the tent. If you didn't see firsthand, you would never believe or understand just how bad the problem was. Even the 4 sheets that Naksha had pulled off the walls hadn't made a clear spot. Just a few gaps between the sheets they had been partially overlapping. The location is close and back to the east. Do you remember that pillar of stone that looked like a phallus? That's only a few kilometers from where they were seen this morning. Naksha explained as she read the details. Carl nodded. That stone was hard to miss, even from the wagon. Plus, Hawk had relayed details to him all morning, but hadn't seen the groups. What he had seen was a number of cave entrances near the base of that stone. I think that I know where they are hiding. They were called rock goblins, and there are caves at the base of that stone. They were all seen near it within a kilometer or 2. So they might be one colony hunting at night. Carl offered. Tessa poked Thor in the side. Tough luck, bud. You're going to have to fight in human form if we go into a cavern system. Thor snorted in amusement. I will take the left, and you can take the right. Carl smiled at their banter. I will head there now, just wait for me to open another portal. The first one won't be human-friendly. From the ground, he couldn't see the base of the rock pillar, and Hawk didn't currently have it in sight to relay the information. So he would open a portal to the top of the stone, then open another at ground level. Carl moved away, and the military mages all snapped their attention to the group. Someone who could open portals was incredibly valuable to their efforts, and if these mercenaries could, then they held a much higher worth than their rank suggested. A few overlords and monarchs weren't much of a military asset by standard calculations. But a mage that could use portal was worth more than dozens of mercenaries who had to travel by land. A second portal opened a meter away from the first, which then faded away. Carl was standing on the other side, holding a small black monster corpse by the neck. Found them. Come on, let's get to work. He laughed. The general's aides shook their heads in dismay as the group charged through the portal and into combat with the rock goblins. General, did you get a good look at that cat demon? One of them whispered once the portal closed. The one with the enhanced physique? The general asked. The advisor nodded. Is it wise to trust him? I've never seen those system markings on anything but a dungeon boss before. If that thing is some sort of wandering boss spawn, who knows what it's likely to do once it establishes a territory. The stout dwarven general laughed. With 3 different dragon gods supervising? No, I think that it's more likely he's a favored champion of the Dragon Church, and he's got some sort of skill that turned him into an actual monster. Trust in the old gods. They would have sent someone to handle him if he was a threat. The advisor wasn't sure about that. The old gods were entirely too hands-off in their management of worldly affairs. If someone managed to sober up a dungeon boss and bring it outside, they would likely just laugh and watch. Chapter 990, Rock Goblins. A few minutes and countless dead monsters later, Carl coded Ren and Void Blast and cleaved through dozens of rock goblins in a single swing, then realized that targeted attacks were a waste of time against a horde of royal-ranked creatures. A dagger-wielding goblin leapt at him, and Carl backhanded it in the chest, sending the creature flying 20 meters before it splattered against the nearby cliff face. As he was 2 full ranks above them, this fight wasn't even a challenge. The rock goblins were durable and plentiful, but they were still goblins, and would never be known as one of the most physically powerful monster species. The only thing that brought them up to the royal rank standard was their defensive magic, and their ability to make earth magic weapons. Even Thor's lightning zone was stunning entire swathes of them to death, nearly as fast as the others could attack them. Everyone had come out to play, and Remy was carefully stripping the corpse of one of the rock goblins of its accessories before swallowing it whole. Not bad. Rich and soft like a sweet potato. Hawk swooped down to test one, and then nodded happily to himself as he found that rock goblins were not nearly as disgusting as normal goblins. They weren't mice, but they were all right. He would save some for Remy. The cave entrance. Naksha called, drawing everyone's attention to the cliff face. There were no more enemies coming out, but 10 meters into the cave, where one would normally expect it to be pitch black, the distinctive shimmer of an anomaly was visible. The rock goblins had come from right here. An overlord-ranked goblin shaman appeared from a cave further up the cliff face, and cast a spell that increased the speed of the warriors. That should be their leader, Hawk decided. A stream of flame roasted the creature, and Hawk saw the anomaly change as he circled back for another attack. Had that one attack been enough to defeat the shaman? From the cave, goblins swarmed out, 10 wide, in an unending stream. The death of their leader had alerted all the others that something was seriously wrong, and they had all left the safety of the anomaly to come and seek revenge. The air on Carl's left shimmered, and he prepared to attack, until he saw the old man with jet black hair and eyes step through the shimmering air. He was wearing the cleric robes of the Dragon Church, and he nodded politely to Carl before folding his hands in front of him. Let the children fight. They need the exercise. You and I will wait here for them to finish. The black dragon insisted. Carl shrugged. It wasn't like anyone in his group would be injured by the rock goblins, even without his interference. To what do we owe the pleasure of a visit from the church? Carl asked. The cleric smiled and nodded towards Naksha. The death god favors that one today. Caught our attention. But that naturally brought you into our sight, which raised some questions. Questions like what Supreme Lady Matilda's guild is doing in the middle of nowhere hunting goblins. Carl laughed. Different branch of the Dark Light host. But we are here because the Black Dragon said that these particular goblins needed to die. In my experience, when the dragon gods offer a suggestion, it's best to go with it. It's never backfired on me before. With brutal efficiency, the group hacked their way through the rock goblins, and the swarm parted to try to surround the small group. Unfortunately for the monsters, the amount of damage that the beasts and the ladies could do was far beyond what the goblins could survive, and none ever managed to make it to the back of the group, where Remy was repeatedly tossing Lotus in the air, so the nature cleric could see what was going on for once. The Naga Queen didn't need her hands to cast spells, and tossing Lotus only took 2 out of 4 anyhow. The anomaly shimmered as the last of the goblins exited, and then vanished as they died, leaving the tunnels into the mountain dark and silent once more. Very well executed. Now I should return to my duties. Send my best wishes to the Black Priestess. The old man whispered, then simply vanished. That was an interesting skill. An illusionary clone, perhaps? No, that should be the recall ability taking him home to his temple. Dana waved to Carl. Care to explain what's going on over there? I know we're good, but it's a bit rude to just sit out a battle. Carl jogged over and wrapped a hand around her waist before kissing her on the forehead. A representative of the Black Dragons came to see what we were up to, as Naksha had gained favor from their patron, and that brought our group to their attention. I'm not trying to make life hard for you, Carl promised. Well, the anomaly collapsed, so that should be all of the rock goblins defeated. That's 4 quests done in the first hour of the day. Where to next? Dana asked, turning her attention to the Black Dragon. Naksha shrugged. I made note of 3 other good quests nearby, but none of them were of particular importance to the Death God. I wonder why this one was. The battle was so simple that it hardly counted as a fight. One good stream of dragon breath into the anomaly would have wiped out their reinforcements before they even came outside. She had a point. If it interested the gods, it was normally something big or spectacular. And that was when the explosion started. Head count, Tessa called. Where is Kara? Lotus asked after quickly mentally calculating who was not here. The whole stone pillar shook, and the familiar magical signature of Void Blast caught Carl's attention. She's in the tunnels. Everyone froze for a split second. Fighting in a tunnel was a nightmare, especially ones that looked like they were about to come down at any moment. Everyone wait out here. I will go assist Kara. Just keep back, so if the pillar falls, you don't get crushed. Carl ran into the tunnels. What was the Void Badger up to? She was shielding her thoughts and not answering his messages. Chapter 991. Kara has been parried. Carl raced through the darkness, following the sounds of snarling and crashing towards the heated battle, then skidded to a stop when he saw the situation. Kara was squared off against a tiny ball of glowing fur, with a large shining rock in its paws. She cast Void Blast, and the fur ball surrounded itself with a rock shield, then pelted her with spears of holy light, which she blocked with a barrier of disintegrate. That made the spears explode, and the cavern trembled. They were attacking multiple times per second, and the whole cavern complex was trembling. Carl shaped a bulwark to trap the furry creature, cutting through the stone to put it in a full bubble, and the battle stopped. Kara, what is that? He demanded. It stole my rock. Kara complained. Carl paused to take in the room. There was a nest of soft dirt, the body of a long-dead white fox, which felt as if it had been incredibly powerful when it was alive, and then the furry thing with the shining stone. Are you sure it was your stone? Or was it in the nest with the furry thing? I saw it first, it's mine. Carl sighed and rubbed his temples. That tiny furry thing could stand toe-to-toe with Kara in a duel. Whatever it was not weak. And it was probably the offspring of that dead fox. I think you might have tried to rob its nest while it was watching the fight. Carl explained, wondering if the creature was intelligent enough to know that he was advocating for it. It wasn't here. Kara insisted. Then the creature stuck out its tongue at her. Pointed fox ears visible now that it had lifted its head from the defensive position it had held around the stone. It definitely heard her and understood. At somewhat less than the size of his palm, this had to be a newborn fox. Of whatever insane species that dead one came from. Just the fact that it was willing to fight with Kara over a stone was impressive. The fact that it hadn't immediately lost was even more impressive. Carl stepped through his bulwark and knelt down. Hello, little one. I have spoken with Kara, and she will refrain from taking your precious stone. Carl gently greeted the fox. The creature gave him a skeptical look, and Kara shrugged. The battle was fun, and she didn't really need one more shiny stone if it meant that much to the little furry thing. Who are you? A childish male voice asked in Carl's mind. I am Carl. Kara is one of my bonded partners. I apologize if she was mean to you. It was Mother's. She can't have it. Now Kara felt bad for bullying the little thing. She reached into her space and pulled out an Overlord-ranked earth stone as an apology, and rolled it across the floor to the little fox. The creature looked up in shock, but didn't let go of the stone in his hands as he pulled it in with his tail. Thank you. The fluffy thing stood up to pull both stones close to its body, and Kara smirked as she had a great idea. Why don't you join us? It's not safe here without your mom, right? Well, we've got a Carl. The Carl is very safe, and he helps everyone grow up nice and strong. Kara offered. The fox was naturally leery of trusting the word of a bully who had tried to steal his family heirloom right out of his hands. But this creature known as the Carl seemed like a reasonable person. There are more siblings. Not all of them are obsessed with shiny things like Kara is. Carl quietly informed the small fox. Trustworthy ones? Carl nodded. There is an evolved former lightning Sparrow named Thor. He's very trustworthy. The fox looked around at the empty nest, where its family once lived. It wasn't suitable to live in anymore, and the young one knew that it would have to leave soon, but it couldn't carry its treasures, so it had been delaying as long as possible. Only if I can keep my mother's belongings. He insisted. I will make you your own private den to keep everything in. Carl agreed easily. The white-furred creature was already a totem, though only in power output. In body it was immature and fluffy, too fragile to be out in the world alone. What do I do? The fox asked. Just two simple things. When I try to move you, you accept the link. Then you need to pick a name, and we can collect anything that you don't want to leave here. Carl explained. The fox nodded, and Carl placed a hand on him to move him into the remaining beast space, which instantly began reshaping to become a large hill full of caves, with long grass on the slopes. New partner gained Stone Fur Divine Fox. Name? Undecided. The little one had gotten completely sidetracked by the space, which had adapted to his will to make what he viewed as the perfect den, and hadn't chosen a name at all. Then, he popped back out into reality and ran off down a small tunnel to start loading all the things he had moved from this nest to a safer one. The big things couldn't get at them in that tunnel, but most of what he brought back were random dried herbs, a few elemental stones that had been etched with crude drawings, and then one scroll tube that was sealed with wax. Added to the stone he had been protecting, and Kara's apology gift, it wasn't much. But the fox was very happy to have it all somewhere safe as he returned. This is a good den. I can come and go so easily, and it holds everything. Wonderful news. Did you decide what we should call you? The fox smiled at him from its new den. My mother called me Tian Chimao. You can call me Tian, I like Tian as a name. Chapter 992. Tian the Fluffy. Carl nodded in satisfaction. Tian was a good name for the holy and earth element fox. He noticed that Tian had also collected his mother's body, and had made a stone coffin to lay her in, along with most of the treasures that he had gathered. Can we go do something important? There were other treasures here, but they were all used up or destroyed by the monsters that killed my mother. She wanted a tribulation lightning stone, and a mithril coin as well. Can we get her all those things so that she can rest in peace? Tian asked. Thor recognized most of the plants that had been taken. They were all holy element items, and he had most of them growing in his space already. Brother Thor will give you most of the plants, and I can make the tribulation lightning stone. The mithril coin I already have. Here you go. Carl agreed. Thor returned to his space and passed over the plants, then returned to his natural form for a moment, so that the new brother could see what he looked like. Ooh, Behemoth Thor. You're a good brother to have. Tian cheered. A small fox could hide dozens of times behind a brother that large. The others all returned to their spaces to meet Tian, who was happy to find that he now had a huge family. He was the only son of his mother from this birth, and the Stonefur divine foxes usually had small litters. Should we tell Lotus about the new brother? Hawk asked as he settled on a perch in the massive ironwood tree that marked the center of his space. I think we should give it a day or two for him to adjust first. Remy suggested. Or we could get the trauma out of the way first. Ray offered. Trauma? I don't like trauma. Why do I have to meet this Sister Lotus? Tian cried. Ray gave him a gentle smile in her humanoid form. She's not a mean sister. She's just very excited about all things fluffy, and scaly, and beasts in general. She's a green dragon priestess. The little fox giggled. Oh, like that. Mother warned me about the green dragon clerics. How they would try to keep you forever and make you fat on snacks until you forgot about growing up big and strong. The others shared an amused look. The deceased fox had been a sage, for certain. As if thinking of her had summoned the priestess, Lotus came running into the room, with Dana right behind her and the others trailing. My patron says there is fluff. She panted, winded from the sprint. Tian took a deep breath and exited his safe space, then hopped up to land in Lotus' arms. Oh my goddess! He's so soft and adorable. Fluff, fluff, fluff. Lotus cheered. She rubbed her face on Tian's back, taking in the softness, and did a little happy dance, which made Dana laugh. And who might this be? Dana asked. I am Tian. The fox informed her, spreading his mental voice to everyone in the room. It was an advantage of his species, part of their divine lineage, and today it saved him from being mistaken as a simple fox. Or so he assumed. Dana didn't miss that the tiny thing was totem-ranked, despite its size. Was he alone in this cave? Dana asked. It was his mother's den. But she was attacked and killed some time ago. Carl explained gently, not wanting to bring up bad memories for Tian. Our territory was taken by bad monsters. Tian explained, then sent the mental image of a group of undead, led by a mythic-ranked shadowy figure. That was more alarming than being attacked by something in a monster spawn. That implied that there was a mythic-ranked leader of the Bomgan invasion force, and they were trying to turn the region's powerful monsters into undead. Carl suspected that the reason they had failed in this case was because the Stonefur divine fox had so much holy magic that they couldn't be made undead. But the fact that she had been defeated must have been a tragedy for the region's balance. Now that he thought about it, could this have been the start of the invasion? The mother had been dead for some time, unless the body was drained and desiccated by the attack. But the protection of a divine beast should have prevented the undead from cursing the cities to the southeast of here. It was over 100 kilometers to the edge of the affected area, but that wasn't far for such a powerful beast. Finished with Lotus' incessant petting, Tian turned his fur to stone, and then leapt over to Ophelia's shoulder, using the logic that she was also furry, and therefore both camouflage and a distraction for the green-robed priestess. Nice to meet you as well, Tian. I am Ophelia, that is Tessa, and the mage is Dana. She greeted her new guest. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Tian laughed as Lotus stood at the werebear's feet and pouted. She could reach Ophelia's shoulder easily enough, but the fox had made his fur rock solid. Then Tian yawned, and his head tilted sleepily. I used too much energy. I need to nap now. He explained, then vanished back to his space. where Ray had dropped a thick silk comforter for him. The defensive spell vanished, and the fox was asleep the instant his head settled on the cushion. With Tian asleep, all the other beasts, even Butterfly, turned their attention to Kara. Hey, how was I supposed to know that he was so adorable? He blocked my attempt to examine the stone. Then I just couldn't stop poking. It's not my fault, she defended. The silence dragged, and Kara huffed in annoyance. Fine, judge me, but that's a really nice stone. She wasn't wrong. It was a very nice stone of both holy and earth elements, perfect for the development of a stone for divine fox. As long as you can learn to get along. I don't want any hard feelings just because you met on bad terms, Carl warned. I helped convince him to join, didn't I? Kara replied. Besides, if I can't have the stone, taking the whole fox is just as good. She muttered, not quite managing to keep the thought to herself. Chapter 993, So Many Spawns. There was a pause as everyone tried to remember what they had been doing before they got sidetracked by a fluffy little fox. A totem ranked fluffy little fox. Are we still going to hit some more of the spawns today? Naksha asked, bringing them all back on task. Right. More spawns. We got the first few out of the way without any issues, so we can look for more. Did you want to go back and let them know these are complete, then get official orders? Or did you want to just hunt for some more targets and return in the evening? Carl asked. We should let them know that this spot has been cleared, and that the anomaly collapsed, then gather more sheets. That way there won't be any chance of overlap or confusion when we go to hunt more monsters. Though we could go back by wagon, and just kill anything that bothers us on the way. Naksha offered. That method sounded pretty good to most of the group. Thor was concerned that someone would attack his wagon, but he had an alternative. Why don't we skip the wagon, and the ladies can ride my back? Naksha and Hawk can scout, and Carl can walk along with us. He offered. That's not bad. It would give them a chance to see us coming. If they were spawned monsters, they would surely attack anyhow. If they were not, there is a good chance that they won't attack a group of our power level. That should help sort what needs to go from what belongs in the area. Naksha agreed. Everyone loaded up to travel, and Ray wandered off to do some scouting of her own. There were some strange creatures in the grasslands, and she was curious what they were. Not because they were powerful or worth killing, just because she didn't have any mental records of most of the strange things she was seeing. The bloodbath spider was not native to this island, so there was no memory of anything that she was finding stored in her genetic memories, which were normally the basis for all of her combat techniques. There wasn't much to see on their first few kilometers towards the camp. But after an hour, it became clear that teleporting here had saved them many hours of issues. We're being charged? Thor asked, confused. Indeed, they were being attacked. He could see the whole horde of satyrs running their way with weapons. But since when were satyrs a hostile species? Sure, they were technically demons, but they were more like a herbivorous beastkin in personality. These ones were frothing at the mouth and charging with improvised weapons. Could they be sick? Ray asked, just as confused about their behavior as Thor was. We could try cleansing them. My healing skill cleanses mental and physical diseases and curses. Tian suggested. Come with me, and we will try. Ray agreed. The tiny fox exited his space to land on her back, and Ray rushed off to stand near the charging satyrs while camouflaged. They waited in the long grass for the satyrs to approach, and Tian covered the whole group with a circle of bright golden light, but they just kept running with no visible changes. Nope, they're broken. The tiny fox sighed, then returned to his space and fell asleep. Remy laughed. Now we have 2 sleeping beauties. I guess we need a totem-ranked Carl so that they have enough mana to actually supply themselves and do more than one thing per day. Tian opened one eye. One day when I'm big, I'll be able to cast countless spells. Mom told me so, but I'm still small, and my body doesn't hold much mana. Remy giggled. Here, I have a book for you. It's an introduction for mages, but it teaches about mana control. I think it's important information you should have learned from your mother soon. Most of her mana use didn't come from inside her body anymore. She would wear herself out far too fast if she tried to cast Apocalypse that way. Tian flipped open the book, then promptly fell asleep with his head on the pages. Well, maybe he could learn by osmosis, Remy decided. Lotus, unaware of what Ray and Tian had tried, also cast a cleansing spell on the advancing horde, with similar results. Nothing, but they were all commander rank and lower. Thor sighed as he sent Bulwark in lightning form to form a wall in front of himself, then charged through them. It wasn't intended as an offensive spell, but the brute force of a charging behemoth, coupled with the shock that the lightning gave them, was enough to wipe out the entire group. Well, that was depressing. Let's keep going. I don't want to fight more of those. Lotus insisted. Thor nodded in agreement. Fighting things that were usually friendly was not fun. There are more weird things ahead. Hawk warned. That was his code of the day for all species that he didn't have a good description or name for. So, it was likely one of the strange local species or chimera that lived on the northeast island. Tion looked out of his space as the commotion of everyone getting ready roused him. Those are pig bears. They only come from the bad mana places, he announced, then adjusted so he was properly on his pile of blankets and not sleeping on the book. Carl wasn't sure how they were supposed to be a pig or a bear, though they had a vaguely bear-shaped body, and pig-like tusks pointing upwards from their lower jaws. But their bodies were covered in patches of scales with fur tufts between them, and they had 6 legs. These they could happily eliminate. They were also Overlord ranked, and there were a few larger ones in the mix that Carl suspected might actually be totem ranked. It was hard to tell with the monsters grouped together like that, but they were definitely a monster spawn group. They were even attacking the ruins of a wagon that had been abandoned years earlier. Chapter 994. Unstable Carl. Carl took out his bow and immediately felt his power destabilize. No matter what skill he tried to activate, his power quality was fluctuating wildly, and his body was surging with power, but not in anything resembling a smooth transition, the way he had every other time he hit a rank change. Tion woke up as the power levels in his space became unstable, and looked around for the cause. It appeared that the Carl was advancing, but he didn't actually know anything about that, as he had been born at this rank, and his mother hadn't gotten a chance to explain all the little things to him. Butterfly worked to build a mana barrier around her space, stabilizing the fluctuations that were making her seasick as she floated on the mana currents. But the others were all out for combat, and willing to wait until Carl got his act together. Just focus on yourself, we've got this. Remy insisted. Thanks. I don't think that I could use a skill right now anyhow. Though, the way that my body is, I might not have to if the goal is just to defeat these things. Carl replied. Remy laughed. You know, that sounds like bragging. Only a Carl would consider taking on enraged monsters with his bare hands and no skills. Carl sat down and closed his eyes, focusing on his advancement, while Tion used earth manipulation to create a dome of stone over him, safe from attackers. Carl began to purge all the stored mana from his body, moving it into the spaces in preparation to refill himself with totem-ranked power. In theory, that should be the nudge that he needed to make the transition between ranks, as long as he hadn't hit a bottleneck. With Tion here, Carl was fairly sure that he wouldn't be hitting a bottleneck right now. However, he couldn't rule it out. Everyone else had hit one at some point, so he would have to get to one eventually. Carl focused on growing his power, and felt the moment that it shifted. The unbalanced state was changing, and the influx was beginning to stabilize at totem ranked, but there was still something missing from his advancement. Like Tion, he was totem ranked in power control, but that wasn't enough to truly complete Carl's advancement. Totemic advancement initiated. Calculating comprehension. Oh, you're so screwed. Kara laughed. Hey, I've got this. We just need to know what it's expecting me to have comprehended. If it's skills, we're miles ahead of the competition. Carl argued. Kara paused. The Carl had a point. If it just wanted him to comprehend a skill at the totem rank, he had met that standard months ago. Verified. Fundamental rule compatibility chaos. Verified. Fundamental rule compatibility fire. Verified. Fundamental rule compatibility mana manipulation. Path to immortality initiated. Step 1 Totemic advancement successful. Totemic blessing active. Totemic blessing reduces all damage done by attacks and skills under totem rank by 90%. His fire was just as good as Kara's Void Blast even if it hadn't gotten a totem ranked bonus. Hopefully the rule bonus was something good. Then power suddenly began to infuse Carl's body, pulled from the ambient mana, the Sword of Champions, and the Hink Claw all at once. Oh, the Carl is a big boss. Tion cheered. Carl heard a rumbling from outside his stone shell and then cursing. But he couldn't tell what was going on out there, and the influx of power was drowning out even the voices of the beasts. So he had no idea that Kara had opened the tiny world and led everyone inside to hide while the world went crazy around them. From a distance, a half-dozen mythic-ranked powerhouses watched the advancement of the newest totem on the continent. It had touched off a minor divine storm, not nearly as bad as the tribulation that the immortals went through, but it was likely to send down at least a few lightning strikes to test his durability. Why is nobody approaching? The lightning won't hit anything but the target. A young divine fire dragon asked the juvenile phoenix beside him. The creature had surely been reborn recently, but the divine phoenix lineages always knew more than others, as they didn't forget just because they were in a new body. That one belongs to the chaos dragon. They're in the same guild. If we all stand over here, she can't accuse us of trying to bully her junior. The phoenix whispered back. The dragon nodded in understanding. She wasn't a divine dragon lineage, but if she ever left this world for the immortal realm, she would almost certainly advance from supreme to legendary status the moment that her power stabilized. At that point, she would be second only to the demigods. And nobody wanted to be on the wrong side of that. The mention of Supreme Lady Matilda caught the attention of the other mythic rank beings nearby, and many made a warding gesture using passive skills to attempt to avoid her attention. Normally, under these circumstances, someone would come to claim him. Every totem on the continent was under the protection or guidance of someone. Or, at the very least, under the supervision of their home nation's leadership. Once you got far enough up the power structure to matter, it was best to eliminate the real psychopaths from the general population from a social cohesion standpoint. That hadn't been done in the distant past, and it had come back to haunt them. A lightning strike hit the stone shield, and a large black demon stepped out of a portal next to the divine fire dragon. Who is advancing? Lord Drod asked. Oh, there you are. This one is from your city, I think. His title said he is from the Drod branch of the Darklight host. The dragon explained. Wait. Carl? Is his name Carl? Lord Drod asked. Yeah, that's the one. Did he come up here looking for stronger enemies to help him break through? Cat demons are a bit odd like that. They enjoy playing with their food. The phoenix asked. Lord Drod gave a bitter laugh. I don't think that even the cat demons can account for all that is strange about that man. He only reached Overlord half a year ago. Not even a reborn minor phoenix grows that fast. Tiffany stepped out of a portal beside Lord Drod and glared at the stone dome. That thing isn't a cat demon at all. It looked like one at first, but I fought him and there is no doubt that he is a being of the chaos plane. The vampire insisted. Lord Drod did a double take at the totem-ranked vampire who was in a black toga studded with diamonds to emulate the midsummer night sky. But it wasn't the dress that caught his attention, it was the conspicuous collar around her neck with a property of Matilda label. It seems that you have a long story to tell. Perhaps we can gather for a nice chat after the advancement is over. Lord Drod asked. Tiffany nodded. That would be best. He is a resident of your city after all. Chapter 995, Totemic Carl. The first blast of lightning shattered the stone barrier over Carl's head, but he didn't even notice. He was so caught up in his transformation and power adjustment that the tingle of the strike was lost in the background noise. In fact, he didn't even notice the next two strikes in rapid succession as he got to his feet and stretched his revamped muscles to ease some of the cramps from the transformation. The Sword of Champions felt oddly hollow, nearly drained of the excess life energy that it had been storing as long as he had wielded it. But the Haint Claw felt oddly revitalized, as if his advancement had made the adaptive weapon a bit more complete. Carl opened his eyes and looked out toward the mythic rank creatures in the distance. Many of them were dwarves from the local region, but there were dragons, demons, and a few monster species as well, including a Naga Queen who looked a lot like Remy after her most recent advancement, except that her white scales had patterns that were silver, not brown. Carl nodded to Lord Drod and Tiffany, who he recognized. Then to the former Lord of Baruch. Now that he was up and finished with his advancement, the myths came forward to greet him. Then paused when they got close and realized that there was something off about this new totem. He's an elite spawn. How does that happen to someone linked to the system? Isn't that reserved for dungeon bosses and such? One of the trollish mythic warriors asked. Everyone looked for answers, but nobody had them. Carl shrugged. I got an upgraded physique from a trial not long ago. It optimized my body, and the tags on my nameplate were the result. I don't think that it changes much, it's just a marker that I have an excessively large mana pool and great durability. Like a dungeon boss. Tiffany added helpfully. Now that Carl was a totem, it wouldn't even be a competition. He would have crushed her in a fight. In fact, he could likely take a 5-on-1 fight of trained totems if they weren't organized. Without using his beasts. Those who knew Carl were the only ones truly concerned about his status. The name adornment itself was enough to warn others not to mess with him unprepared. So, while he was definitely powerful, it wasn't a big deal to them. Tiffany gave Carl a suspicious look. That same thing didn't happen to the insane badger, did it? Carl chuckled. Kara only wishes. No, she got something even better. She evolved from a winged void badger to a chaos badger. The vampire looked horrified while the dwarves let out a sigh of relief. Chaos badgers must have a better personality than the void badgers were known for, right? Chaotic was better than greedy. What were you planning to do now that you have advanced? Lord Drod asked, thinking of city politics. I'm here with a group of dragon clerics, helping to clear some of the excess monsters from the spawns on behalf of the Black Dragon. Carl explained. The dragons in the crowd nodded happily. That was a noble endeavor. Kara wandered out of her space and looked up at all the mythic dragons. She knew most of these species already. But there were a few. The divine fire dragon transformed to appear to be a 2-meter tall and muscular human with glowing eyes that flickered like the fires his species was named after, picked her up to examine the strange creature. He was still young, barely old enough to be called a young adult. So he didn't even notice when Kara subtly bumped him with her snout and just assumed that she wanted to be carried in a different way. I will have to inform my tutor about this. It's not often that I find a species he hasn't mentioned before. The young dragon bragged while the phoenix beside him tried not to laugh at the naive boy. Kara spread her wings and glided around the area, memorizing the feeling of power that she was getting from these people. Knowing the details of the mythic rank was essential to advancing her powers, she assumed. Maybe not right now, but sometime soon. Where are you off to next? The phoenix asked. Back to talk to General Omar of the 7th Narazir Regiment. We took on a mission from him and need to report back on the success, then get more targets from his list. Carl explained. You keep saying we, but I only see you and the badger. The phoenix stated, confused. Oh, the others stepped out for a moment so that the aftermath of the advancement didn't injure them. They're still mostly monarch ranked except for the black dragon. The other mythic ranked leaders quickly congratulated Carl, then nodded to Lord Drod, who was unofficially in charge of keeping track of him. As the new totem was from his city and none of them were insane enough to think that Matilda would actually improve anyone's behavior if she were left in charge. I will see you when you get back to the city. Come visit me at the castle when you get back. We have much to discuss. Lord Drod insisted. Of course. We shouldn't be too much longer. A month or two at the most. Carl agreed. That wasn't long in the extended lifespan of the higher ranks. He was about to say something else when a portal opened, leaking chaotic energy that immediately drew Kara's attention and made Tiffany sigh. Lord Drod, gentlemen, would you like to join me at home for that conversation? It appears that I have been summoned. The vampire explained. Carl smiled. Please greet the Supreme Lady for me when you see her next. I will remain here with my team. The others looked leery of entering that particular portal, but they also didn't want to anger Matilda when she offered hospitality. It wasn't often that she was awake and in the mood for guests, so this chance to meet her might not come again for quite some time. Chapter 996, Durable Carl. With the area now quiet and clear, Thor led the rest of the team out of the tiny world to inspect Carl's changes. You advanced well. Much more durable than I had expected. Thor commended Carl as he checked the area for hidden dangers. Thanks. Now, we just need to get you up one more rank and you'll be the truly indestructible behemoth. Carl joked. Naksha laughed as she joined the group. Well, now we're going to shock the general when we return. Leave as monarchs and overlords come back with a totem. That's what I call a productive day. Dana agreed. The spectacle of Carl's advancement had cleared everything from the area. Nothing wanted to hang around once the mythic group started to show up, and it made for a very smooth trip back to the 7th Narazir Regiment. The regiment saw them coming and even sent out an escort to lead them back into the camp. Carl would have thought that it was a kind gesture for a returning mercenary group, but he had a feeling that they were warned to be nice. The courtesy was just a little too much and a little too forced to be natural. There were other totem-ranked mercenaries in the area. There had to be if they were going to take on the sorts of threats that this area had to offer. General Omar came out to greet Carl as they approached the command tent area, and the general looked much happier than he had this morning. Welcome back and congratulations on the advancement. Tell me, did you perhaps gain an option for a new class when you reach totem rank? The dwarf greeted Carl. Sort of. There is one more step that I have to take before I can change my class. I got the notice from the system some time ago, and now that I meet the requirements, I just need to find a system-linked trial or dungeon to enter. Once I do that, I can change my class and see what comes next in the progression. Carl explained. General Omar nodded. That makes sense. Do you know what sort of class it will be? Your abilities already seem to be well beyond the average. If you manage an even better option at totem rank, they might start offering you special bonuses for your assistance. Carl smiled. That was the part the general was most interested in. Getting Carl and his group to stay longer and help him clear out some of the excess monsters. Well, we got all the groups of rock goblins. They were coming from an anomaly within the spire, and it's closed now. Then we got some pig bears on our way back as well. Those were wiped out and we didn't see anything else between them and the camp. Carl explained. The general nodded and removed the markers from the map. Your group is a bit of a mixed bag right now, with everything from monarchs to a totem-ranked leader in one spot. But there are still some targets that are appropriate for you and not a waste of a powerful mercenary. For example, this group is mostly monarchs with a group of overlord-ranked elite forces and a totem-ranked leader. That's only 30 kilometers from here, so you could get there and back in a day again if you wanted. It's better to be at the camp overnight unless you're going to set a strong guard, as there are still random monster spawns in the area. General Omar suggested. Carl nodded. We have a good system set up for overnight journeys, but it's always good to have company who will keep night watch. It didn't really matter as much to them as it would to any other group. With the tiny world and Ray, they were pretty well set for nighttime security. If they were truly concerned about security, Carl could even just close the tiny world's entrance and only a few creatures of his level would even be able to find out it existed, much less how to enter it. Will you be continuing in this region for some time then? The general asked cautiously. Now that Carl had advanced to totem rank, there were political considerations for him when he returned home. On this island, there were enough totems that they didn't all control a region of the city, but they were all top forces of whatever city that they lived in, and there were expectations of them if there were to be trouble while they were in the area. We will be here for some time, yes. Not only because it's the will of the dragon gods, but I also need to consolidate and stabilize my advancement. The more practice that I can get, the better. So, a week or two worth of adventures is likely to be the bare minimum, and that's assuming that we can find a proper fight where I can flex my abilities enough to test them. Just clearing out easy fights isn't going to help me at all. Carl explained. The general looked at the markers on the table. Well, that limits the number of missions that will be truly beneficial to you. But I still see 3 that are appropriate for your team and might give a totem a good enough fight to at least get to test his skill advancements. Carl nodded. Sorry to make excess trouble for you. General Omar laughed. We've got plenty of trouble of our own. Finding missions for an oddball group is a relaxing pastime in comparison. Now, did you want a visitor's tent in the camp? Or did you prefer to set up your own? Carl looked to the others, who all just shrugged. Dana smiled. We might as well use theirs. I think we will all step out for the evening anyhow. That didn't directly mention the tiny world, and the general already knew that they could use a portal to come and go as they pleased. Consider it done. The lieutenant will lead you to the tent and you can take this mission sheet with you. It's the closest one that suits your group. Chapter 997, Check and Test. Thor and Tessa decided to stay in the actual tent in case someone were to come looking for their group. But Ray also remained outside the tiny world, also hoping that someone came looking for them in the middle of the night. Ray was nothing if not optimistic. But in the middle of an army camp that had been long established, there were no attacks, roaming monsters, or traitors to bother them. When Carl got up in the morning, everyone else was up and working on breakfast, after which the plan was to have the ladies ride on Thor to the mission location. That gave them a chance for bonus fights, which would make the Black Dragon happy. It also gave Hawk time to scout more of the area than simply flying in a straight line would. I wonder just how fast Carl is now that he's advanced? All that extra power and the physique boost has to have made him pretty powerful, right? Lotus asked, waving her fork for emphasis. Carl shrugged. We can test it once we find something for me to fight. But I should be about half again as strong as I was before the advancement. I don't know how that will translate to speed, which is more dependent on reflexes and muscle something. Lotus laughed and nodded. It was surprising that Carl actually knew that much about anatomy to start with. Half of the elites in the Golden Dragon Nation only knew that the body worked, not how it worked. It was the clerics that took most of the biology and medical courses. Thor shrugged. We can test it here. Well, the strong part. Just jump straight up and let yourself float when you reach the highest point. Carl crouched and launched himself 20 meters straight in the air. With a running start or not going straight up, he could most certainly do better, but the power in his legs had noticeably increased. While he was in the air, Carl took a second to scout the region around the camp, and Hawk emerged from his space to start his morning routes. If he found a good fight, more stone rats, or anything else of interest, he would be sure to relay the message. Carl let himself fall, then slowed his descent just before landing. Lotus gestured to a pair of footprints on the ground where Carl had sunk 10 centimeters deep when he launched. You've got to be heavier than you look. I've never seen a human leave footprints like that in packed dirt before. The little cleric noted. It would certainly make me easier to track. I think it was mostly just inefficient technique on my part. But now I've got a good idea of what my legs should be capable of. Carl agreed. I have found our target. There is a totem-ranked giant leading what looks like his whole clan. Definitely spawned, they've got that crazy eyes no talking thing happening. Hawk updated. Thor turned toward Hawk's current location as the target had moved overnight and increased his speed to a trot. That made for a gentle swaying of his back, and it would bring them to the target in less than an hour. The giants wouldn't run into anyone else from the army camp during that time, so it was still their target for the day. There wasn't anything likely to pick a fight between them and the giants, but that wasn't a big deal. Thor hadn't gotten to fight giants since he evolved, and it would be a fun challenge to see how they could be smashed without his defensive ridge. In his new form, he had to be a bit more careful about the back of his neck, but most things didn't get past his horns anyhow. The giants did have a long reach though. There was a chance that they could attack past his horns to try to get to his back, or to Tessa. That would be a factor he had to consider for the safety of his knight. Carl casually jogged alongside the behemoth, letting his excess strength throw him into long leaping strides. The dwarves would certainly be envious of their travel speed, as even with their impressive strength, short legs made 30 kilometers an hour a difficult speed to reach. The giants saw Thor about the same time that Carl saw them, and the whole tribe turned to face the incoming threat. Ophelia patted Carl on the shoulder. Brings back memories, doesn't it? Hill giants everywhere. We all know the routine, go have fun with the clan chief. Carl buffed the group, then rushed off to circle to the left of the giants, as the leader was at the back of the group giving instructions of some sort. The system didn't translate their words, and Carl didn't speak giant, but he was fairly sure that some of those words were about ways that Thor could be roasted. The way that the giants were responding to the enormous behemoth was definitely hunger. The leader didn't seem interested in a duel and brought 2 strong overlords with him when he moved to face Carl. Not that they would be expected to be able to do any sort of actual damage to Carl, but if they could keep him off balance, it would be enough for the giants' leader to get in a few extra hits. It was an excellent technique in theory. But when Carl opened the battle with Gravity Slam, the 2 overlords were hurled from their feet and crushed into the soft grass. That left the 2 totems alone to face each other for the next few seconds, and neither was planning to hold back. Carl coated the Sword of Champions in an oversized blade of ghost fire, while the giant created a massive club of stone using an unknown earth-type attack skill to extend his reach. The 2 oversized weapons collided with a flare of elemental power that blasted outwards in a ring of destruction that made Remy curse and Ray laugh. Now you're just making a mess. Remy yelled at Carl as he locked weapons with the giant. Carl couldn't see it, but Remy wasn't joking. That first strike had leveled everything within 20 meters, including a half-dozen Monarch rank hill giants. Carl and the giant disengaged, then clashed a half-dozen times in the next few seconds, testing each other's strength. Satisfied with the results, Carl smiled. He was stronger than the hill giant, physically, but his power level was still a fair bit lower. Chapter 998, Poke the Giant Totem. Remy stared up at the giant in front of her. It had managed to sneak through the lines of golems and fighters to make it to her and Lotus in the back lines. That alone was enough to be impressed with its ingenuity. But in her usual form, Remy was much too small to be fighting the giants head-on. Instead, she transformed into spirit snake form and struck out at the giant, which rolled away, flailing with its blade to keep her bite away. Remy's head darted forward as the giant swung wildly but too slow to stop the attack. Half the creature's body was in her mouth when Remy bit down, sinking her fangs deep into the giant and flooding it with venom. With its arms trapped to its side by her mouth, the giant flailed wildly and even tried coating itself in stone armor, but the skill failed to force Remy's fangs from its back, and it remained trapped. A few seconds later, its frantic struggles ended and Remy instinctively swallowed. Then she realized that with a full giant in her spirit snake form, she wouldn't be able to transform back for a while, and she would be slow-moving until she finished digesting. Worse, Lotus was giving her a disgusted look. And the little cleric was right. The giant didn't even taste good. 4/10 mediocre and inconvenient. But she had an idea. If she shrunk, the food should shrink with her. Yes, that worked wonderfully, and now she was a small snake with a full belly, but she could move easily. She didn't lose any strength when she shrunk, but both her body and the giant lost weight. It was the perfect solution to a problem that she had created for herself, and it came with the added bonus of completely confusing the other giants. They couldn't find Remy in all the chaos, but even under the influence of the monster spawn, they hadn't forgotten that there was a venomous spirit snake here somewhere. She couldn't have gone far. The aftermath of the battle between the two totems had made it impossible for the giants to retreat, and Remy had been at the back of the battle to begin with. They just needed to find her. Carl and the totem-ranked giant had no idea what was happening on the other side of the battlefield. They were too engrossed in their own battle. This totem was one of the strongest Carl had seen, and the durability of his species was incredible. Like Carl, he had totem-ranked defensive barriers up, and the earth element was known for its durability. Unlike Carl, he healed at a more normal rate. So, the wounds were slowly building up on the giant as they battled, and his energy was running low while Carl regenerated stamina, and he was using less mana than he could regain. Then Carl got a brilliant idea. Hawk had Purgatory Flames, an enormously powerful fireball that would burn all of his mana in one shot. He kind of wanted to see what happened if he used it with the difference in their mana pool. The giant's expression changed as Carl smirked, and then the fireball was launched, burning easily through not only the creature's barrier and body but the weapon it had made as well. Nothing was left of the totem-ranked giant but ash as the spell exploded on impact. The blast, on the other hand, was significantly larger than Carl had anticipated. When Hawk used it, the ball was just fire, and if you weren't set aflame, you were generally alright. This time, the blast was like artillery exploding, and even from 50 meters away, Tessa was nearly thrown from Thor's back before eternal lightning caught her. Mana flooded back into Carl's body, making his limbs tingle with the imbalance as they struggled to return to their default state. But there was nothing left to fight, and the last of the giants had been killed by the overflow of the final blast. Tessa straightened her robes and glared at Carl. You could have warned us before you did that. What sort of insane power was that, anyhow? It nearly knocked me back to the goddess, and we're in the same guild. Carl shrugged. It's Purgatory Flames, a super fireball skill that Hawk has. I didn't think that there would be a blast like that. It had to be a result of the hill giant's earth magic collapsing. Is everyone alright? Tessa nodded, and Ophelia transformed back to give him a thumbs up. Well, that's the first target of the day down. Should we head on to the next one? Naksha asked, still in dragon form. Dana landed gently on her back. We might as well. The day is still early, and we have 4 targets on the list. The next one doesn't have a totem-ranked leader, though. Why don't we split up for efficiency? All of us can go to the next one on the list, and Carl can take his own. As she finished talking, Dana stuck her tongue out at Carl, then pulled her curls back into a rough ponytail as they had already escaped the loose braid she wove that morning. That's not a bad idea. Their target is 5 kilometers northwest. Yours is 15 to the north. Hawk offered. Hawk has the target in sight. Follow him northwest and you'll find it. Then we can both meet at the 4th target for the day. Carl suggested. Oh, not a bad idea. If things go smoothly, we should be done by lunch and we can go together back to camp. Ophelia agreed. Remy giggled as she climbed up one of Dana's golems for a better view in her reduced snake form. This should be fun. We can have a competition. And then we can make a wish list of things to have for dinner. Everything was huge again in this form, and she had just remembered that she never did get to try all the sweets she wanted to when she learned to shrink. Chapter 999, Boss Raid. Carl waited for the group to leave, then took a running leap into the air so he could teleport toward the target in a couple of long jumps. If they were going to compete, he wasn't going to waste 20 minutes running over to the target. The group that Hawk had identified for him was a group of ogres, 1 totem with 30 or so overlords. Workable, but he would have to see how difficult of a fight it might be. What did you find for the others? Carl asked Hawk. The mission is a group of grass trolls with 4 overlords and many monarchs. Hawk explained. That explained why he didn't think that Carl would have to assist. Most of that group would be unlikely to ever break Thor's barriers. Carl landed near the ogres, who immediately charged, only to be met with a barrage of Void Blast enhanced arrows. The skill had already been at totem ranked, but with the extra spell power that Carl had obtained and whatever hidden bonuses came with being a totem, the overlords were completely unable to take a hit. Ogres weren't the toughest of opponents as they had no magic of their own, but still, the casualty rate was impressive. Carl was about to turn his attention to the two leaders of this ogre tribe when a sudden blast of unholy energy vaporized them and a group of gaunt-looking humanoids with no noses on their faces stepped from a portal. Well, what do we have here? The meddling beast master, away from his pets, too far to recall them to his side, and away from the influence of the dragon gods. One of them cackled gleefully. Carl looked over the black-robed figure, which reeked of death magic, and then smiled. Did my old friend from Bomgen send someone to play with me? Carl asked slyly. The man laughed and equipped a shield and sword. Oh, he set the bounty, all right. But don't think that we're some weakling necromancer group. We know about your particular skills against mages. The man announced. Carl checked their system status for the names and found they were in a language he couldn't read. Possibly a disguise spell. But the colors were clear. 1 unholy paladin type class, 2 rogues, a cleric, 2 mages, and 5 warriors. All totem ranked. Wait, did I really get a whole adventuring party just for myself? Kara will be so jealous. Carl laughed. He tried to inform the Void Badger that they were missing out on the fun stuff but found that he could not connect to her mind. That shouldn't be right. He could normally contact Remy in her lab from halfway across the continent and the others were only a dozen kilometers away. There had to be a barrier of some sort. The mages began casting buffs on the group and Carl called for his summoned helpers. 2 Lamia and a pair of dire bears, his usual combination. Plus the epic guard who was equipped with the Haint Claw. Once the force was ready, Carl didn't hesitate and went straight for the cleric. The paladin cursed as a Lamia blade intercepted his attempt to block Carl's advance, allowing the first strike to hurl the shocked adventurer 20 meters before he hit an invisible wall and slid down, lightly wounded but unconscious. Skills flew at him from all sides and Carl aimed for the closest warrior, using his larger size to his advantage to force the man back. Or, he assumed it was a man. The way that these attackers were all identical suggested that either he couldn't tell them apart or it was all a disguise that he was unable to see through. The warriors moved to encircle Carl once a mage managed to petrify one of the Lamia so the paladin could escape to engage the epic guard who had already disabled one of the spellcasters. Void Blast, in a dome around himself, gave Carl room to work and caused the magical barriers on the warriors to dim even as their attacks crashed against Carl's Eternal Lightning. That thing has insane damage reduction. Hit it with big spells every time. The paladin warned his group members with a system message so that Carl couldn't hear their conversation and adjust his strategy. It's not just reduction, he's got a base ignore amount as well. Did someone wake the cleric? He's up. Moving slow though. Whatever status effect is on him wasn't cleared by the potion. It wasn't just a magical status effect, the cleric had suffered internal bleeding to the head when he hit the barrier and only after he managed to properly heal himself did his mind begin to clear. Carl used Gravity Slam to knock down a pair of warriors, then charged through to engage the paladin and call a new pair of Lamia bodyguards to replace the wounded and petrified pair. Then, Butterfly and Tion worked together to create a small army of illusionary dwarven warriors with stone hammers and armor as Butterfly activated Illusionary Domain over the battlefield. It looked just as it did before, but now she had much more influence over the space and her illusions were more convincing. Shit, incoming. He summoned dwarves. The paladin shouted and the warriors immediately moved to defensive positions surrounding the mages and the cleric in a well-rehearsed formation. Carl had no doubt that this was a dungeon raiding team. They had tactics and strategies for all the common tactics that he had come up with so far, and they had brought a proper group with every needed role. The epic guard fell as the rogues cut her down and the Haint Claw returned to Carl's hand. He could summon another, but that took a few seconds, unlike the bear golems or the Lamia. Seconds that he didn't have when defending himself against 2 rogues and a paladin. Pain lanced through his back as a dagger bypassed his barrier and found a weak point in his armor, and Carl lashed out with his clawed hand, raking deep furrows into the rogue's face. The spell on his body shattered, revealing a very normal-looking human face, staring blankly at the sky with its one intact eye as the rogue died. That gave Carl a few seconds of breathing room and he called a new epic guard to the battlefield. Go get the cleric. Don't let him cast a resurrection. Chapter 1000, Healer Goes First. The epic guard flickered out of existence using the Haint Claw's movement skill and then reappeared to stab the cleric in the back before being forced to retreat again before the mages could blast it out of existence. But the task was complete. The spell had been interrupted and the cleric was bleeding heavily and wheezing with a punctured lung. He would have to take care of himself first and speaking the words to a spell would not be easy. You cowardly bastard! The paladin shouted in frustration as he charged for a shield slam, which Carl met with bulwark, sending a wave of dissipated energy to both sides as 2 monumental forces met. The illusionary dwarves were falling fast, lacking skills, while Tion lacked the mana to constantly refresh so many barriers. Carl never heard the chanting as a pair of mages completed a ritual spell, Dread Blast. But he felt eternal lightning shatter then Ghostfire body before his left leg was coated in a black energy that caused pain to shoot through his body. Nullify dissipated the effect, but the ritual was successful. His barriers were down. The paladin managed to keep Carl's blade busy while the rogue found a chance to strike at his back, poisoning him again. But this time, the rogue darted away before Carl's blade could reach him, and Carl was forced to retreat a few steps to keep the pair in front of him. All of the summoned creatures were now busy with the warriors and the mages who were fighting desperately to keep the epic guard away from their healer who glowed with golden holy magic as he tried to keep the group alive. Then, the formation collapsed as one of the warriors was defeated and the Lamia pair was suddenly together in the tight formation around the mages, gleefully hacking away. The rogue peeled off the battle with Carl, leaving him to duel the paladin while the agility-specialized teammate rescued their physically weakest members. Then, tragedy struck the adventurers. With the lines in disarray, the epic guard made it through the defense again, and the cleric's head rolled free of his body. It was only a matter of time now. Carl was certain of it. The distraction cost Carl dearly, and the paladin's blade found home deep in his side. But a void blast, infused fist shattered the paladin's shield, and the fighter was flung to the ground as the black mist of void body healed Carl's wounds. Weariness crept into his body until he brought eternal lightning back up. But even with the extra stamina regeneration, he couldn't do this forever. He had burned through 2/3 of his mana already, and half the attackers were still alive. The fact that they were down their healer would help, but Carl couldn't be sure how much of their mana remained. Rend saved some mana and forced the warriors into defensive positions as the rogue finished off the Lamia pair. But the warriors couldn't hold for long as Carl battered them with his most mana-efficient attack skill. A spell hit Carl without warning, and the mage collapsed in exhaustion. However, the others smiled as if it were all worth it. Negative effect applied, skill lock, 15s remaining. It didn't sound long, but with only Eternal Lightning active and no ability to refresh it or parry with skills, 15 seconds might as well be eternity. The warriors charged Carl, leaving only the rogue and the paladin to work with the last surviving mage against the two bear golems. 3-on-1, with the warriors still able to use their skills, Carl was able to do nothing but parry and hope that Eternal Lightning held out long enough that the Blade of Champions wasn't damaged during the battle. Fortunately, he was not truly alone. The bear golems had thick stony fur, courtesy of Tion, who was also using earth manipulation to attack the final mage. The mage screamed in agony as he was impaled by a stone spear, and Carl's fist ended a distracted warrior. How's he still using skills? The paladin shouted, well aware of the timer on skill lock. He's not. I think it's the damned golems. One of the warriors fighting Carl shouted back. They were certain of it. He hadn't used so much as a flicker of power in the last 5 seconds. But still, something had been using earth magic to kill their mage. It couldn't be anyone but the golems. Carl's other summoned assistants could use skills, so it made sense that the bears could as well, even if they looked like regular golems. It had to be an ability that his class granted. The paladin nodded decisively and then took an item from his inventory. It was a simple ivory horn, but the paladin sighed as he raised it to his mouth. A moaning wail came from the horn, and Carl prepared to be hit with something nasty. But the expected strike never came. Instead, the whole group began to fade from sight, while with the vaguely familiar feeling of the recall spell permeated the area. They had taken their fallen and run away. Bastards! Do either of you have a timer? Did we hold them here for long enough to get a confirmed kill? Carl asked. Tion just shrugged. He'd never seen a clock before in his life. He understood the concept of time, but he had no idea how it was measured. Likewise, Butterfly did not have a clock, but she had a better grasp of how time was measured. So, she summoned an illusionary dwarf to speak on her behalf. Approximately 7 minutes from the first death. It explained, then vanished. Not long enough. But Carl had bigger concerns now that he had realized he was being targeted. What if a similar group had come after the others? He couldn't contact the rest of the group, so he couldn't even warn them that they might be in danger. At least not until he nullified the barrier and all the links came flooding back. Test. Anyone home? We finished our group and we're heading to the 4th point. How's your fight going? Remy's mental messages made Carl chuckle, but he decided to send her a warning before getting sidetracked by banter. I finished my fight and then I was ambushed by mercenaries sent by Bomgan. Keep an eye out for the others, they might be targets as well. Chapter 1001, Scared the Monsters Away. Carl headed for the other group just in case someone came for them as well. It sounded like Lord Bomgan has asked the mercenaries to target Carl in particular and not just his entire group. They had mentioned getting him away from his beasts and the dragon clerics, which did make it sound like they were not the target of the mission. He found them waiting near the final group that they had selected for the day, a group of monarch-ranked gnolls led by a single totem-ranked chimera. It was an odd combination for sure. But they were likely to have originally been part of a larger monster spawn with multiple monster types in it, as many dungeons had. But when Carl approached, the chimera simply turned and fled. That was not the behavior of a monster straight from the spawns. The creature must have used an ability to make the gnolls accept it as part of the group, and now that it had noticed that there was actual danger coming its way, it took the most prudent course of action and retreated. Ray gave Carl an arachnid look that conveyed infinite frustration, and he shrugged. It's not my fault that he ran away. Carl insisted. You scare the monsters away. Ray retorted. Technically, chimera are beasts. Thor added helpfully. If a spider could roll her eyes, Ray definitely did it. I will wait this one out so everyone can get more practice in. A good fight pushed me to totem. I'm sure that it can push everyone to overlord with enough grinding. Carl informed the others. Tessa smirked. It wouldn't even be a fair fight if you got involved. A certain someone tells me that you soloed a raid group. The Red Dragon cleric tapped the side of her head, indicating that it was a mental notification, and Carl briefly wondered if she meant her Red Dragon patron or Thor. Dana sighed. We will have to discuss this later. Ladies, let's show the boss mob how the rest of us do things. Thor led the charge into combat with everyone on his back, allowing Dana to float up into the air just before they reached the knolls, while Ophelia transformed in midair as she leapt into the battle. Remy was still in snake form and fighting from Ray's back. Adding her bodyguards to Ray's golems and her unit of Spectre Knights, ghostly undead in black armor. Carl shook his head in dismay. Dana said that it was unfair for him to fight, but he had forgotten that he could add a small army of undead to the fight. Ray and Remy were a military unit all by themselves. They had tanks, agile damage dealers, even a spellcaster and healer combo. Remy's healing totems might not be as good as Lotus' version, but they were more than enough for their group. The air distorted beside Carl, but he didn't feel any threat as the portal opened. With delicate steps, a small white dragon with shimmering scales that reflected impossible colors as the sun reflected off its body emerged from the spell and looked up at Carl with great curiosity. Interesting. I guess I lost the bet. I was totally certain that you just beat them so bad their minds broke, the dragon whelpling announced. Carl smiled at the strange young dragon. Oh? What did you wager? Carl asked. The little dragon growled. One of my favorite immortal pearls. But what were the odds that someone actually sent mercenaries after a wandering world boss? Carl chuckled. World boss is a bit of a grand title, don't you think? The dragon shrugged and puffed a small rainbow of fire. It's like dungeon boss, but outside. What else would you call it? Carl frowned. The dragon had a point. Logically, the names were related. I was thinking something like an elite mob. Because my constitution is epic grade. The dragon perked up, momentarily forgetting about his lost pearl. Oh, that's not bad. We could call you a named elite. It reminds people that they can't fight you one-on-one at the same rank, but doesn't sound like you're in charge of stuff. I don't suppose that you're from the same location as the mercenaries are? Carl asked. The dragon shook his head. No, they're from Nerid and I'm from Gabble. Gabble Kingdom, that is? Not here. I live in the Opal Mine in Gabble City in a where over a very nice dwarven inn. They make the most wonderful mead. Did you know that you can make cake with mead and it tastes like honey butter cornbread? Carl blinked slowly. Did that even count as a cake? If the dragon thought it did, then it did. That sounds wonderful. We will have to check it out sometime. But if you're from a whole other country, how did you find out so quickly? The fight only ended a few minutes ago. Carl asked. I have a friend in the Arago Temple in Nerid where they went for resurrections and healing. The spider priestess there appreciates sweet things just as much as I do. And when she heard about the fight, she called me to let me know that a fun thing happened. Then we made the wager and I lost. Carl patted him on the head. My friend, I believe that you were set up. Look over there. What do you see? The dragon stood on his hind legs so he could see what Carl did. A blood destruction demonic spider. Nearly ready to advance to totem rank. Oh, that devious spider woman, she tricked me. The spider goddess must have told her about the fight. The spider goddess loves watching her children and that one is exceptional. She's got better skills than almost any other spider I've seen. The dragon grumbled. But on that note, how many spider goddess temples are there in Nerid? Carl asked. The little dragon shrugged. Thousands. They've got a weird thing going on there. Arachnid monsters, arachnid and insectoid beastkin, and the darklings. Carl clearly had no idea what that was, so the dragon explained. Oh, they're humans, but also not? When they are teens, they get a blessing from the dark gods. It makes their system users superhumans with death magic. Like the unholy paladin that you beat up. Even the cleric was a spider goddess cleric, but they all wear the same silly outfit when they want to be all incognito. I think it's a spider thing. Look at me, I'm all mysterious, the creepy thing in the shadows. Carl smirked. That was totally Ray when she was little. Now, she was legitimately terrifying if you weren't on her side. And she still liked to lurk in the shadows. The little dragon sighed. I've seen all I need to. They really did run into a big boss totem that can take on a whole team alone. But the fight is about to end here, and if I don't run away, Mom will kill me for eating snacks before dinner. He opened a portal and Carl quickly stuck his head through to see where the dragon was headed. The view was of a glimmering mountain face, unlike anything Carl had ever seen before. Oh, you've never been here before, have you? The south face is pretty distinct. You should be able to use that sight to open another portal in this location. Then the little dragon pushed Carl's head back through the portal to his own side and ended the spell. Chapter 1002, Too Strong for This. Carl watched as the last of the gnolls fell before the might of Ray and the group gathered to discuss their tactics. What worked, what didn't work well, and what they thought that they could have changed to make their fight more efficient. It was not a bad fight by any means, but the ladies were getting used to working as a team and not relying on Carl to take care of whatever was most troublesome. I think that if we spread the golems a bit further apart, we will end up with breaches in the line. It would be better to have them stay close and push a bit deeper so that the greater golems can fight without exposing the flanks. Ophelia suggested. Dana nodded. That sounds like a plan. We make a pretty good wrecking ball, but we really could use 2 more golems to fill in the rear. Tessa shrugged. Getting surrounded isn't the goal anyhow. We just need to keep moving so that they can't get too many behind us. Thor does have a tail weapon, so the back isn't fully exposed when we are in a cluster like that. But when Lotus is on the ground doing her thing, we will have to move Ophelia to the back again. Tion was confused by the conversation. Why are they making plans like we're not here? Because we're 2 ranks higher than they are. The things that we'll want to be fighting are too strong for them to deal with. And the things they want to fight to help them grow are too weak for us to interfere without making it pointless for them. Carl explained. Oh, that makes sense. Even Sister Ray is too strong to be picking on these gnolls. Ray turned a glare at the tiny fox. Did he just call her weak? Tion didn't see what he said wrong or understand why she was giving him evil looks, so he just dismissed his concerns. The fight was over and now they could go see more stuff. Should we return to the camp and see what they have for us next? Or do you want to just inform them that we finished all 4 tasks and we're going to wander for a little bit and see what we can find? Carl asked the group. That was a good question. Taking missions was kind of rigid and boring in Naksha's mind. The monsters that were overpopulated weren't just the ones that were directly threatening the towns and the military outposts, so it would be better if they just attacked whatever there was too much of. The dragon shrugged. I think we should explore and fight. Hopefully we can find some of the larger excess monster spawn packs and start really thinning out the numbers. Nobody else had a problem with it, so Carl opened a portal back to the camp. I will hold this open while I inform them of what we're up to. Just give me 5 minutes. He didn't actually need that long, as there was a scout standing only 10 meters from the portal's opening. Hey, guard. Can you pass these to the general? We finished these 4 missions today and now we're going to head inland to look for more groups that aren't on the list. Carl called. The dwarf jogged over and took the notices with a smile. Good work, mercenary. We will see you again one day, I'm sure. You can send us updates if you would like, so that we know what else you've managed to eliminate. Some of it might be on the low priority list. Got it. The black dragon wants a general culling of the overflow, so there might be a lot of little things on the list. I will have someone write the details down and we can send them in once a week or something. Carl agreed. That works for us. Good luck. Carl returned to the ladies and closed the portal. All right, we're good to go. Do you want to go any particular direction, or just wherever the mood takes us? Adventure. Lotus and Remy cheered simultaneously. Well, that pretty much settles it. We will head away from where we know that there are other army units and marked villages and just look for excessively large groups of monsters. Do we want to fly or walk? Carl asked. I say that we keep walking. I have heard that there is something strange about the layout of the land, and I wonder if we can see it firsthand if we are on the ground and Hawk is in the air. Naksha suggested. There was a slim chance that they would see something different from the ground and the air, but it wasn't zero. Nobody knew for sure if things were actually changing or if it was an illusion. If it was just a powerful illusion or a localized effect, they might be able to provide extremely valuable information to the army units. Gabble, or this part of Gabble, as Carl now knew that there was another region named Gabble Kingdom, had a serious lack of information infrastructure. They might be rural, but not having a proper map of your own country seemed a bit too negligent. Naksha returned to dragon form and made a loop over the area, then gestured for them to follow her to the north. Hawk hadn't seen anything interesting in that direction, but it was away from any of the army units and headed for the middle of the nation, where they would be the furthest from any of the regular patrols. If they wanted to find monster packs that hadn't been culled at all, that was the best spot to find them. Naksha had only been flying a few minutes when she began to get excited. I think that I found a fresh anomaly. I think that I just saw it open. At least, I don't think that it's a portal. She declared. Definitely not a portal. The monsters just appeared all over the place. I think that this place likes us. Hawk elaborated. How so? Ray asked hopefully. Food. Hawk cheered. Chapter 1003, Crab Invasion. The sound of crashing through the brush and long grass alerted everyone that they weren't going to have to go looking for the spawn, it had already found them. And the moment that Carl saw what they were facing, he knew that Hawk was right. This was food. Giant crabs with a nearly circular flat-topped shell and 2 meters tall, to be precise. Their coloration was all wrong for where they had ended up in the grasslands, and the bright oranges and greens were immediately recognizable, but the creatures were incredibly fast and every bit as large as Ray. Because the spawn had just started, they hadn't had time to gather, so what the group was facing was only 3 Overlord-ranked crabs. But the crabs didn't seem to care about the disparity, and they were charging straight at Thor. The thought confused him. Did they think that he was the biggest threat because of his size? Or did they think that they could defeat and eat him? Both were incorrect assumptions and didn't bode well for the intelligence of their targets. But they did at least hesitate for a moment when Ophelia transformed. She was covered in fur, not hard scales, and nearly as large as Thor was. However, the crabs still continued to charge for the behemoth, snapping their claws as their legs clattered with their eagerness to reach him. Only when they were 20 meters away did they begin their attack, sending powerful jets of water towards Thor while Ray prepared to pounce. The crabs worked well together and the streams all hit the same spot on Thor's armor. But that made little difference with Eternal Lightning active and the team charged into battle. Dana's golems quickly isolated one of the targets, pulling it away so she could face it alone, while Ophelia worked with Naksha, who was in dragon form but on the ground. The two were similar in overall size, though Naksha was twice as long and not nearly as tall as the dire bear. Both were much larger than the crabs, and it was almost comical watching them pin down and pull apart the monsters. Carl could almost hear them salivating. The final one continued its assault on Thor until Ray arrived and cleanly punctured a forward spot on its shell, killing it cleanly with little damage. Her long, armored forelimbs were perfect for the job, as they could get deep enough for a clean kill without ruining any of the potentially edible portions of the crab. "Sorry about your luck, Hawk. We're keeping this one," Naksha called, unsure where Hawk was at that moment. The gigantic Thunderbird had a better crab hunting method. He had gone to find another group and simply grabbed one by the shell and flew into the air, intending to slice it apart. The crabs couldn't reach the top of themselves, and it seemed brilliant until he got a jet of magical water in the face. Lifting them was not the best way. Rend to the rescue. Hawk cut into what he hoped was the head section with Rend coated in ghost fire, and the crab died after only a few hits. That worked much better. After making sure it was dead, Hawk tossed it in his space for later and began to bombard the others from a distance where he could dodge the return fire. "Are we still working? We don't have to keep working, do we?" Tian asked hopefully. "What did you have in mind?" Carl replied. "I can make a big pot with a lid and we can have crab for lunch. Mom showed me how she loved crab." The tiny fox replied. "Crab dinner, anyone?" Carl asked. Naksha paused her examination of the dead crab and nodded eagerly. "We need a plan." She agreed. Tian created a large pot with earth manipulation on stands to create a fire under it. Catching on quickly, Remy filled it halfway up with water and Ray tossed her dead crab in it. Lotus had plenty of spices and Tessa started a pot full of rice to go with the crab. Hawk returned to his hunt, slowly adding more crabs to the pile and organizing his ingredients. "I need to make a donation soon. I've got too much outdated food," Hawk informed Carl in a serious tone. "Oh," Hawk nodded gravely. "Look at all this. It's delicious but royal rank and lower. I don't need nearly that many snacks. The more powerful I get, the less I need to eat, and it's all piling up." Carl chuckled. The bird space looked like a supermarket meat section. "I need the room for new things." "All right. The next village that we come across, I will make a deal to trade them a lot of meat from you. You can transfer some to the guild house storage as well." Hawk made a keening laugh. "The storage room at the guild house is full already. They've got enough to last them a year. They really did need to start cleaning out Hawk's space then." The water was already boiling for their crab stew, and Lotus was happily adding diced potatoes and carrots to what smelled like a lemongrass curry base. "Do you think that this will pull the other groups of crabs to us?" Ophelia asked as she settled a blanket on the grass. "Hopefully. It would let us stock up without going hunting them. Hawk is already working on clearing some of them out, but as he's at the overlord rank, the same as them, it takes a bit to safely eliminate them alone. In a group, we can take care of them in seconds. Especially if we're not trying to save the corpses." Carl explained. That sounded like a massive waste to everyone, and not just the food-obsessed Hawk. The wonder that was crab stew was enough to end all thoughts of productivity. The smell of spices and crabs together was wafting away on the wind, filling every breath that they took, and Carl knew that there would be no more working done today, even if they were attacked. The ladies would just ask him to kill another for the pot. "Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.